This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com. Welcome to another edition of the Impact Podcast. I'm John Shegerian, and I'm so excited to have my longtime friend with us today, Leo Raudys. Leo, welcome to the Impact Podcast.
Thanks. Good to see you again, John.
Leo, can you, I've known you now 13, 14 years. Before we go into what you're doing today, can you go back and talk a little bit about your history? You've been one of the sustainability rock stars of the United States since I've known you, and you've been a great inspiration to me. But I want our listeners and viewers to learn more about you before we get talking about Call to Recycle and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, thanks. That's very kind of you. Well, just to take you way back, I mean, I'm an immigrant's kid from the south side of Chicago. It's great because you and I have always bonded in the fact that we both, grew up in these big cities,
Right.
Chicago, New York. But
Right.
So yeah, I the way I found myself into this field is just pretty circuitous. I mean, I've always been just kind of an explorer, searcher, not really knowing what my next step's going to be. So, through sheer luck, I ended up in Minnesota. Got involved in environmental regulation. I was a regulator for a number of years, then went to Best Buy where you and I met. Got in pretty deep in sustainability, pretty much kind of in the early days when things were getting going. So that was pretty exciting. Then I've been I'm back at a nonprofit at Call to Recycle, but in between worked at Microsoft for a few years in their data center, their cloud business, which is just a ridiculously interesting industry. But government, private sector, nonprofit, I've pretty much seen it all at this point.
But you really always had a heart and a passion, and were inspirational to me with regards to sustainability and making the world a better place. Not just us using up the resources for our own benefit while we're here, but actually doing something about the problems that exist. And it's been your heart, it's been your passion. I've been good friends with you for now over a decade. Call to Recycle. And for our listeners who want to find Call to Recycle, it's real easy. It's www.recycle.org. Call to recycle.org. When it was originally set up, what was its mission statement when it was set up, Leo?
Yeah, so we were formed about 25 years ago by the battery industry. And essentially it was because the industry saw this sort of issue looming, which is, what's going to happen to all these batteries that we're putting into the market? This is the rechargeable battery industry. And, back at that time, the concern was about, metals getting up in landfills and leaching into the groundwater, et cetera, et cetera. So they basically, a few pretty innovative thinkers, got together and they created us, and we've existed to this day. So when it started out, we were primarily a compliance-driven organization. In other words, trying to figure out how to actually responsibly meet regulations, do the right thing, all that. But we've grown substantially over that time to the point where, the way I tell people, the way I tell my mom, so this is the way I could explain to her what this new gig was that I was taking. I said the best way to think about it is if you're recycling a battery somewhere in the US or Canada, odds are we're doing it. It's like, because we collect at over 15,000 sites across the US. But that didn't happen by accident. I mean, it was a lot of hard work. A lot of the staff at Call to Recycle have been with us for pretty much the entire ride. But yeah, we started out as a small compliance-based organization, and now we do voluntary recycling all over the place. Rechargeables, also alkalines. So yeah, I would say the best way to think about it is we're sort of the logistics backend for doing battery recycling.
And I love on the website, under the Call to Recycle logo, leading the charge for recycling. I love that.
Endless puns in the battery world.
Endless puns in the battery world. Leo, the last time we were together in person, we had this lovely dinner in Seattle where you now live, and you were at Microsoft. Walk us through a little bit about leaving Microsoft, one of the greatest and most iconic brands on the planet, to go take over this great brand called to recycle. What was on your mind, and what was your thought process on leaving something very comfortable, amazing brand? You could have stayed probably the rest of your career if that's what you wanted. Um, and then coming over here and taking on climbing a new mountain.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's Microsoft is a tough place to leave. They treat their employees extraordinarily well, and on the sustainability side, they're just really doing amazing things. So made a lot of great friendships, and I still count some of my former teammates as just great long term colleagues. So it was a great experience, and as you know, I mean, the data center industry is just booming like mad.
Oof.
So I learned a ton, but I've known call to recycle going back to when I was a government employee back when I was just fresh out of grad school, and I know the organization pretty well. I'm super super passionate about the mission, and it's just an opportunity like this does not come around very often. If you're lucky, it'll happen once in a lifetime. Great organization, great people, great mission. And on top of that, and I saw this a little bit when I was in the cloud industry working at Microsoft, the whole world is just moving toward batteries. So,
Right.
you just think about, the nexus with climate change. This is where the action is. It's an opportunity to make a pretty big impact and work with some great people. I mean, that was really impossible to say no to.
That's actually fascinating. When we got in the business in 2004 and I met you over 10 years ago, we didn't talk. When you and I had meetings, it was about electronics, it was about reuse. Batteries wasn't a big issue back then, 15, 16 years ago, and during your tenure at Best Buy either. But now for us, and as you said, it's where all the action is. It's literally the last mile of electronic recycling and the circular economy. So you are literally probably in the hottest spot in terms of electronic waste recycling and energy. Every news story seems to be about batteries now and how to appropriately handle them when they come to the end of life. So I really do think you're at the cross section of impact and circular economy and ESG behavior. So that's exciting to be taken out. Where do you now you've been there 60 days. How has the first 60 days been? Has it gone to plan in your mind before you actually started on January 1st, or has it been somewhat different than what you were actually thought?
Well, this is your opportunity to use the famous Mike Tyson quote, but it's been pretty exhilarating. So yeah, it's been a couple of months, and again, I knew a number of the people already walking into the job,
Wow.
so that was a known quantity. But I've met a lot of people that I hadn't known before, so that was great. But I'd say it's a very steep learning curve because it's just a dramatically changing, rapidly growing industry. New battery chemistries, new players coming in, especially on the processing side. So it's been a pretty big learning experience for me, but it's pretty exhilarating. So I came in with this notion that we had a certain amount of opportunity in front of us because of what's happening just across the economy in terms of electrification and batteries. Everything I've learned is just the opportunity is probably 10 times what I thought it was. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and referring to that, we were talking off air before we started today's podcast, when I asked you that question, I said, yeah, it's like Mike Tyson's old saying goes, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the head. So
Yeah.
I assume the first 60 days was a little bit of a hit in the head for you, but for a good reason. I mean, because it's a brand new mountain for you to climb as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right that just batteries everywhere. It's like and going back to what excited me about this is like you talked about, I've been in corporate sustainability now since 2009, and people have been talking about carbon, but there's been just so much increased emphasis, rightly so, and pretty hardcore goal setting around net zero and things like that. The reality is that none of that's going to happen without batteries.
Right.
You talk about solar installations, renewable installations, what have you. I mean, batteries are basically the key to reducing carbon emissions. And so back to your question about what did I learn in the last couple of months? That's just become super super clear to me. I mean, it's but people we talk to, partners, et cetera.
Well, let's talk about the front end and the back end. The front end, you were already the leading brand, as you said, with 50,000 or so locations,
15.
aggregating batteries on the front end. But the reason why you and I get along so well as friends is, good is never enough. So now that you've come in and you're leading this whole, brand now with 50,000 locations, what's great mean? What does the opportunity look like for you in the months and years ahead in terms of more aggregation on the front end?
Yeah. So, well, I'd love it for it to be 50,000. It's actually 15,000,
Oh,
but
sorry. Okay.
no,
Still a
that's
big
okay.
number. Still in America, that's as big as that's
Yeah.
huge in the recycling industry.
And that's thanks to all the retail partnerships we have. But
Right.
I say for us, it's going to be about continuing to solidify those partnerships and keep growing that network and make sure that consumers actually continue to have places to recycle batteries because it's like the rates of recycling are still lower than we'd like them to be. It's not for lack of opportunity and access, but so I think there's still work to be done there. But honestly, it's things like electric vehicles, electric bikes, scooters, data center batteries, all this stuff that traditionally has been sort of an afterthought, are hitting the market pretty heavy. And 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road, we're going to have to figure out actually what to do with these when they come out of service. And you've seen this in the e-waste industry. People really weren't thinking about what to do with all these big TVs, CRTs, et cetera, until it was too late. Next thing you know, you got all this glass that people are concerned about. So we don't want to end up in that situation. And so, so for us, it's just making sure we continue to keep our eye on the ball on our existing network on consumer batteries, keep growing that, but really figure out how we can help the industry figure out the back end, both reuse and recycling of these bigger batteries.
For our listeners and viewers who've just joined us, we've got Leo Raudys with us. He's the president and CEO of Call to Recycle. To find Call to Recycle, Leo and his colleagues, please go to www.call, C-A-L-L, the number 2, recycle.org. Call to recycle.org. Leo, 15,000 locations, more and more batteries are coming. Explain the magnitude of the problem. As you and I both know, e-waste is the fastest growing solid waste stream in the world by an order of magnitude of maybe 5 times more than number 2, but only 18%, 17.5 to 18%, according to the UN numbers, of electronic waste around the world is being responsibly recycled. Is the problem that big with batteries? And is there a huge delta for us to try to climb in terms of more battery recycling as well?
I would actually break it down into a few different pieces. So one, I think on the processing side, there are pretty good processors out there who actually do the right thing in terms of environmental compliance, regulation, and all that. Where I think there's a gap is on the carbon side. So I just talked about that a few minutes ago.
Right.
Nobody's really paid that much attention to what the carbon intensity of battery recycling is. So I think that's an issue we've got to get our arms around as an industry, and a lot of that is around transportation. So we'll definitely benefit from electrifying transportation and that part of the supply chain. But it's the way I like to think about it is if you're trying to reduce the global human carbon footprint, right? So by doing all these great things that renewable energy installations, reducing our energy consumption through efficiency, et cetera. So basically, you're squeezing that balloon of carbon. And unfortunately, right now with batteries, there's a risk that we're just going to basically squeeze that balloon and it's just going to pop on another end because we've got carbon emissions coming out of the recycling supply chain. So I think that's still an opportunity. I don't worry so much about like creating new Superfund sites or things like that. I think that's pretty locked down. But I think we've got some work to do on the carbon side. And then aside from that, I'd say it's making sure that people have awareness of what to do with these things, so that they're not actually causing problems at places like waste handling facilities. Because with these lithium-ion batteries, if they're not handled properly, they're a fire risk. So it's been actually a pretty big emphasis for us for the last couple of years to try to educate people on how to properly recycle these batteries, because if you don't do it right, if they come into contact with each other, that's an issue. And I would say the last piece is, and I'm sure you see this as well, is all the embedded batteries. It's hard to find a piece of electronic equipment these days that doesn't have a battery in it. So if you're an e-waste recycler and you're trying to figure out how to responsibly, it's like you got to worry about the batteries inside in ways that you didn't have to in the past. That's a pretty big challenge.
Let's go back to the carbon issue because you're much more experienced and versed in that than I am. Section 933 of the new climate bill introduced by the Congress included carbon credits for the safe disposal and recycling of batteries and other forms of electronic waste. Is this going to be a new era that we're walking into? And is there going to be carbon credits available for the responsible recycling of batteries now?
Potentially, I would say I don't know what's going to happen with that bill, but I would say there's going to be a variety of market signals coming into play that's going to push the industry toward less carbon intensive solutions. Because right now everybody's competing just purely on price, and that price does not include the embedded cost of carbon. So if you're, let's say you're a data center company and you want to get rid of your batteries, you got a room full of batteries and you're trying to figure out what to do with them, right? Lithium-ion batteries. You're going to go for ease of use, right? You're going to find a provider that's going to make it easy for you and possibly take it off your hands for free. But if they charge you something, you're going to go on price, right? But that price doesn't include carbon. So, maybe that cost is going to get affected by carbon credits entering the market. So if somebody's able to compete in that space, they'll be able to be more competitive on price. Maybe there'll actually be an actual price on carbon. So if you're able to transport those batteries more efficiently from a carbon perspective, so you're more cost competitive when you take into account carbon, that'll give you an advantage in the market. So I think there's going to be a variety of things. I don't have a crystal ball to tell you which one's actually going to have the most impact. But yeah, I did see that bill. I thought it was pretty interesting, and it's a good step in the right direction. It's here. We got to deal with it.
Right, right. With regards to the new administration, how much does that help your efforts as the new leader of Call to Recycle to achieve the goals that you're going to be setting out in the first couple of quarters of this year?
It's hard to say. We don't. As a nonprofit, we're pretty focused on our mission of collecting batteries. So we really don't get involved in like advocating for this or that policy. Aside from just being able to provide technical expertise, but we do keep a pretty close eye on what's happening. So, having spent many years in government, seen many administrations come and go, I'd say over the first, 6 to 12 months, it's a period of a lot of change and a lot of momentum. We're starting to see that. I'd say the encouraging signs, it seems like there's a focus on investment in renewable technologies, emphasis on advanced battery technologies. So that kind of thing, I think, is going to feed more and more momentum toward figuring out the cleanest battery technology solution. So I think it's all good.
Right.
Proof's in the pudding. But I think it's I'm pretty optimistic.
With regards to, for our listeners and our viewers out there, Leo, give some shameless promotion to people who want to do the right thing with their small gadgets or batteries. Where can they drop these off? Who are your retail partners so people just don't throw this stuff in the trash anymore, so they responsibly recycle it using your Call to Recycle network?
Yeah, Home Depot, Lowe's, Staples. You can basically, I would say, municipalities. What I would suggest to anybody to do is go to our website,
Right,
which we're graciously given the people the address to,
right.
and you could pretty easily figure out, what the closest recycling center is for you. But yeah, we've got great partnerships with retailers who just, take this pretty seriously, and you can make sure that they actually get back to where they need to go to be responsibly recycled and safe. And yeah, I would say the best thing to do is just go to the website and check it out. But
That's great. 15,000 locations is great. Talk a little bit about, we've talked about the front end a little bit. In 25 years, as you and I know, in sustainability, many things change. Talk a little bit about the back end. When you bring in all these batteries, has the back end side of who gets your batteries and how they're recycled responsibly and the beneficial reuse of the materials inside of them changed dramatically? And how hopeful you are about that part of the equation as well?
yeah, I'd say the processes are getting more efficient, and I think a lot of that has been driven by cost, but also, frankly, corporate partners and governments, really pushing toward more circular solutions. I think we've still got a long way to go in terms of truly getting to a sort of a circular economy for batteries. I don't know that anybody's figured that out quite yet. There are definitely some interesting players out there that I think are going to be we're going to look back a couple years from now and say they were innovators that really pushed it. So I would say right now, my view of it is over the last 5, 10 years, I've seen incremental improvements with existing technologies, nothing really quite like sort of new, like that next big thing, sort of,
Got it.
kind of like the change from, the horse-drawn carriage to an automobile. I haven't seen that kind of thing, but I feel like it's coming, and I think it's going to have to because the scale. It's you just think about, again, going back to these big batteries, within just the next 4 to 5 years, there's going to be about 10 times the number of lithium ion batteries being installed at renewable grid installations. It's already quite huge. So, to be able to actually handle those on the back end, we're going to have solutions at scale. And so I think, I think we're all going to have to change and figure out how to, do sorting differently, go to more automated sorting, less reliance on just, pure manual labor, which is the way it's been done for a long time. Is to just really figure out how to keep up with the pace of what's coming at us.
Leo, we were having a nice conversation before the podcast, and I said to you, you've been a constant form of inspiration for me, and you've always wanted to make the world a better place in your public servant work in the state of Minnesota, in your leadership work at Best Buy, in the electronic waste sector there, and at Microsoft. And now you have this unique position as the CEO and president of Call to Recycle. Just from an ESG, circular economy, sustainability point of view, I feel like we were early 10, 12, 15 years ago in our career work and what we were doing day to day. But I feel like the world has caught up with us. And, it's easy to get discouraged and become sort of, change career paths or something when the whole world's not lined up. You feel like almost the world's working against you. Do you feel the same way, that all the stars are sort of lining up now in ESG and circular economy, both from a business, a nonprofit, a governmental, political side, and that really it's a great time to make the world a better place from a sustainability point of view and circular economy point of view?
It's dramatically different. So, back when I was working at a publicly traded company, I would ask our investor relations departments, like, okay, how many times are you getting asked on investor calls, about environmental issues, social issues?
Huh.
And as much as all of us in sustainability wanted to believe that it was on investors' minds, the reality is it just wasn't. It never came up on quarterly earnings calls. It never came up on the private investors' calls. When I talk to those same folks today, because I still, know folks in my network that work in this space, it's dramatically different, especially in the last 12 to 18 months. It's I don't know what the data are, but the percentage of times that you actually have somebody raise an ESG issue in an earnings call has gone up considerably. For sure, it's part of the conversation. So, it's you follow money, and it's dramatically different. And I think, when I was at Microsoft, I saw that the level of commitment and just the true engagement on these issues and really putting, their money where their mouth is. That's happening all across the private sector. Big difference.
Leo, because of your unique career path, nonprofit now, leadership of a nonprofit, publicly traded companies, government leader, public servancy work, what can you share with the new generation of young people that want to make the world a better place, that want to be the next Leo Raudys? What can you share with them in terms of how to get involved, what to do? Do they start their own company and try to go into the recycling or sustainability world on their own? Do they join a bigger firm? What kind of advice do you share now with the retrospective that you have, with so much experience that you have underneath your belt already?
Yeah, well, the advice I'd have to anybody, and actually I've had many conversations like this when I used to teach at the University of Minnesota for a few years, and
Right.
a lot of students who asked me the same thing. So I was like, what do
Right.
I do? Where do I start? And my advice applies to sustainability to any kind of field, which is, build your network out, get to know people, reach out. Don't be afraid of being told no. If you ask for 20 informational interviews, you get one yes, that's a success, right? And just to really build those networks, because that's one, you're going to learn things that you didn't necessarily know before. You're going to find out about opportunities, and the things that you think you want to do may turn out to be the things that actually turn your crank in where you want to go. So yeah, that's the first piece of advice. As it relates to sustainability, I still think the absolute best way for somebody to get connected and to understand the field as a student, as a young person, is net impact. So, get involved in a local chapter, go to meetings if you can, once we can be meeting again, because that's where you're going to find people basically in the same situation. You'll run, you make professional acquaintances, and you'll find those opportunities. And the other thing I would say is, just be pretty fearless in terms of pursuing the opportunities you think are the right ones. Don't necessarily listen to what people are telling you are the right or wrong things. You should trust your gut. More often than not, you're going to be right. And if you're wrong, you learn something in the process, right?
Right. We're for our listeners and viewers to find Leo and all the locations you can recycle your old batteries and small gadgets at. Go to calltorecycle.org. Call number 2 to recycle.org. Leo, last thoughts. Where do you think we're going to be when I interview you again a year from now on Impact? Where do you think we're going to be in terms of your journey at Call to Recycle, and where do you want to be?
That's a real good question. So I'm 2 months in, so I don't know the answer to that yet. Here's what I do know that the scale and the pace of change is unlike anything any of us have seen before. The way I would best describe it is to think about what the world looked like before the Industrial Revolution and after it. That's pretty much what we're going through right now, but in a very, very much faster pace. I mean, the Industrial Revolution took about 100 years.
Right.
This one's about 10, 20 years, where we're basically going to have a completely electrified economy with cleaner energy sources. So that's happening right now. I think, over the next year or two, it's going to look very different from what it looks like today. Part of that's going to be investment from the federal government because of the change in administration. But I don't know the answer to that. I'd say if you were to ask me in 3 to 4 years, I would hope and expect, I'd be disappointed if we didn't actually figure out how to have a cleaner reverse logistics supply chain for batteries. I think we really need to do that because, again, batteries are the key to solving climate change. And, we better make sure that this part of the supply chain actually is as clean as it possibly can be. So give me 3, 4 years. I think it'll look different. Year, we'll see.
No problem. Well, you're always welcome back on the Impact Podcast to share your journey at Call to Recycle. Again, for our listeners to find Leo and his colleagues and Call to Recycle, go to www.call2recycle.org. Leo, every organization you've touched and I've seen you at over the last 10 plus years, you've made better. You've always made the world a better place. You've been a great inspiration to me, and I want to thank you again for being on the Impact Podcast today.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Trajectory Energy Partners. Trajectory Energy Partners brings together landowners, electricity users, and communities to develop solar energy projects with strong local support. For more information on how Trajectory is leading the solar revolution, please visit trajectoryenergy.com.